welcome to Saugus Historical Society. I see some somewhat unfamiliar faces and a lot of very familiar faces, so it's nice to see everyone tonight. We'll start our meeting as we usually do with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I won't waste too much time before I introduce Curtis. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. One little announcement. I mean, we don't do anything very elaborate through the winter. Wait till all the potential snowstorms are done before meetings start up again in March. So March, April, and May, we will have a new schedule, and members will be getting their newsletter with what's happening. We don't even have all the programs scheduled just yet for the spring. Next weekend, the Marlia Graves Schools has its Festival of Trees, and along with a lot of other organizations and individuals in town, we have decorated a tree, which we hope you will enjoy seeing. And Garden Club too, yep, that's right. And the Tree Committee and a lot of other organizations. I was there briefly starting to decorate the trees, but the theme of ours is the semi-cinquentennial, the 250th anniversary. And I think there's some other groups that have chosen that as a theme as well, because it's such a special opportunity in a historic period of time. So without any more ado, though, I will introduce Curtis White. Some of you probably know him pretty well for all his years at Saugus Ironworks in various capacities. There's at least one picture on the wayside signs that show him there still, but he's a wealth of knowledge about everything in Saugus's past. The person he's going to be talking about today, we've only really known tantalizing glimpses into his background through some histories of Lynn and Saugus. And I will let Curtis tell us all the rest.
Very good, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. Charles is here from Essex Heritage, that's a good thing. This project came about, I had done some work at the Ironworks, sort of ancillary things related to the Ironworks, and one of them comes up through the Historic Structures Report in Saugus, and it brings up all the different buildings that were on the Ironworks site. And that, I think, was one of the first places where I began to get introduced to Pompy, even though I didn't know it. Remember Dick Provenzano, a past president here? We even talked about it without any idea that this person we were talking about was Pompy. And through many years at the Ironworks reading Alonzo Lewis's History of Lynn, that's when Pompy really came into my beginning of understanding. And I began to look into some other things, background of Pompy once I learned a little bit more, and try to figure out if there was a way to bring in more information about him, because almost everything I see even today is derived from Alonzo Lewis's history and expanded upon, and different people take it in different directions, and maybe I'm going to do the same thing too, based on some of the understanding that's there or misunderstanding. It's pretty exciting to see that people are looking for Pompey's where Pompy lived. I think that's an achievable goal. There's some good deeds and so forth that survive, that if you understand the history of it, I think they'll be able to narrow it down to at least a 2-acre spot where Pompy had lived. So let's start out here. This is entry from, or part of an entry from Alonzo Lewis's history, and it talks about Pompy being enslaved to Thomas Mansfield. That's most probably not true. That Thomas Mansfield had 2 slaves, that's probably not true either. But all of these things have some sort of basis in fact. It's just sorting out the details. That he was King Pompy. This is the one I'm kind of very curious about and I don't have an answer for. Some people say that King is from his original background, that he was some sort of a prince, and others say it's because he was part of the this Negro election thing and that he was elected a king. I don't know. I haven't found any evidence for either of those being true, but I think it's, part of me doing this is so that other people hopefully can add to it, sort of a crowdsourcing thing to find out what we can find out together. The holiday once a year. This is interesting that it's 1829, talking about maybe running concurrently with Election Day. That there was also a Negro Election Day, and that would have been throughout maybe even the Northeast. Some of these things started in the 1740s in New York because of a slave riot. So they were looking to give enslaved people some sort of a voice. A little glade by the river, talking about the Saugus River, where people would come to visit him. I'm not sure where that comes from. Again, I feel that has some sort of basis in fact, but I don't know what it is. And some people credit that with maybe being an origin of the so-called Black Picnic that they have in Salem, even running today. So all of these things would be really interesting to find connections to. And that he was from Gambia, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I'm going to start off with Alonzo Lewis, and I don't want to make this about Alonzo Lewis, but he's a really fascinating person and deserves a lot of research himself and maybe a biography. He's an amazing person. This, in addition to Essex Heritage sponsoring this book, the Topsfield or Essex County Agricultural Society was the original instigator of this, that was willing to take some of the knowledge that I had acquired at the ironworks and help me put it into a book form. Originally it was going to be, and it was, a presentation for the Essex Agricultural Society's annual meeting for the society itself. And so I presented that, and the fair manager asked me if I would be willing to apply for an Essex Heritage grant. And I thought, well, why not I take the same work that I've been doing on this visual presentation and make it into a book form so that more people can utilize the information. Because I think this really is a really interesting story that Essex County can be proud of and work upon. So in 1847, the Essex Agricultural Society, the so-called Topsfield Fair now, used to meet all over Essex County in different years in different places. For about 80 years, they went from town to town to town until finally they settled in Topsfield. And the reason for that was they were granted, or they were donated a big space where the current fair is, including the co-op that's across the street. And so that became an experimental farm where they experimented with different kinds of fertilizers and all sorts of things. But they didn't actually have the fair there until 1910. They had a number of places in between. But in 1847, the fair, the cattle show, as it was called, was welcomed to Lynn, Massachusetts, and Alonzo Lewis gave the welcoming address. And this is in the fair records, just reminiscing about agriculture and its importance to society. 1847 is also, Alonzo Lewis spent his whole life in Lynn, and all kinds of things went through Lynn. There was the Hutchinson family singers. He did work for the Hutchinson family. He supposedly built the original High Rock Tower in Lynn, and I believe he may have also constructed the cottage for them. In 59, he wrote a song about abolishing slavery or creating freedom for black folks. This was in, what does it say, in Boston, New England Anti-Slavery Convention, that he wrote the song. He also wrote a number of poems encouraging freedom for slaves in the 1820s. In 1832, he was vice president of New England Anti-Slavery Society, and he was in anti-slavery for most of his life until his death. Like 1859 is when that convention took place. 1851, he put together Lynn's city directory, and he had a nice big ad in the front of it for himself. And what I think is interesting, it says that he did all these different things, including, or whatever was made, maybe done with a pen, including, intricate engravings. There's actually associated with this advertisement is a picture of his cottage in Lynn that apparently he had put together. So anything with a pen. I discovered in the Phillips Library in Raleigh, he traced out this rail line to go to the Newburyport rail line. He's the person who surveyed that and made this map. And right at the intersection where all those, the rail line, this is the proposed rail line, the Ipswich River and Route 1 come together, that's where the Topsail Fair is. And that was just totally coincidental that I found that. And that's just a detail from the map. It covers most of the northeast of Massachusetts. I'm kind of jumping all over the place, hoping to develop a story here with Alonzo Lewis. In 1830, Massachusetts, like it did in 1794, put out a request for all the towns, they used the term cities, to make maps of the mill places and rivers and so forth. And this letter was sent in particular to the selectmen in Lynn. And this is in the Alonzo Lewis papers in the Phillips Library in Raleigh. This is the copy of the letter that the selectmen got, but it's in the collection of Alonzo Lewis's papers. So he's the person who delineated that map for the city of Lynn. And it was very specific about what the scale was supposed to be, and this piece here in the bottom corner of the map exactly lays out what that scale is according to the instructions. So this is the map that's in the collection of the Massachusetts archives that Alonzo Lewis put together. And these maps are really great. The 1794 ones, there are even little pinpricks in the map where you can see it's the original manuscript map that the surveyor went out and traced all these lines. So they're really fascinating to see just as a piece of artwork in itself. But this is his 1830 map, which I believe is an adaptation of his 1829 map that he did for the History of Lynn. Now in this other 1829, it said Pompey was freed about 1750. Well, I can see that about is the key word here. That didn't happen in 1850. It talks about the slaves visiting from Lynn, Boston, Salem, and other towns. This is in his 1829 version. And so again, that's what they're using as the basis for the Black Picnic kind of idea. So I'm not sure if those do connect, but it's an interesting thought to look into. And the happy days of their native land. And I really kind of doubt that. But because of, and this is why I got into Alonzo Lewis, is because he was such an ardent anti-slavery person. I'm wondering how much he actually embellished what he knew in order to create the situation where people would be sympathetic to the slave, to further push the anti-slavery idea. So this is a 1830s map of Gambia, and I believe that Gambia was sort of a generic place. I don't know if Pompey actually came from Gambia, or if we'll ever know. But it may have been a generic place where most of enslaved people were coming from, that were being shipped to New England and the East Coast. This is a map from the 1730s, and on the right is the same area by NASA from the air. But there were what they called slave factories up and down the coast of West Africa. And the enslavers and the people that were working in this market, the slave market, were not welcome inland in Africa in order to collect the slaves. And enslaved people became enslaved for a number of different reasons. Some of it was debt, some of it was war capture, as in like prisoners of war, where they're looking to get perhaps troublemakers to the incoming culture and put them onto boats and ship them someplace else where they're not going to be in trouble. Some would sell themselves into slavery. But a lot of this is going to happen in this area in Gambia. And as you look at this map, down at the bottom of that little loop, there's an island there called James Fort Island. In 2011, they renamed it Kunta Kinte Island for the TV character there from Roots. So this is a place that isolates the incoming people trading in slaves to the rest of Africa. So they don't go inland to these places. They meet on these islands in these slave factories, as they called them. The one thing I find interesting in this is in the bottom, just underneath the fort, you can see that little round place that they call the linguist's room. And it really it shows that people are coming from all over the world. This must have been a bit a specialty occupation so that they could transport people and communicate with the customers that were going to be from all over the world, from Portugal, France, England, wherever they were coming from. Back to that. I'm also curious as to whether enslaved people were actually looked at beyond just physical ability, whether or not they had any particular skills. Africa had iron making places that, iron making tradition. They had, were expert, I guess, in planting rice. And in the Carolinas, the Africans were used to develop rice agriculture there, and even things like cloth. Cotton production and dyeing. And that's where I'm going with Pompy. I don't know if we've asked these questions before, but could Pompy have possibly been sought out for skills that he had before he even came to New England? And you think about the rich clothing and so forth, and traditions of things like indigo, which are coming from Africa, and that blue and white look that you see on printed cotton fabrics in the 18th century on the East Coast. And also Delft ware has that same kind of look to it. So you can see where possibly those kind of skills could be used for some for markets that were here. So the first thing that I could find on Pompy himself was in the vital records. And it shows up in the modern printing of the Lynn and the Reading vital records that he married Phyllis, and in the intent he marries Phoebe. I couldn't find either of these documents. Apparently there are two documents that document this wedding. One is because they have two different names for apparently the same person. But that happened, and at that time he was a servant to Daniel Mansfield in Lynn. And that marriage took place on December 5th, 1745. But I have no idea what happened. There's no other record that I could find of who Phyllis or Phoebe was, or if they had any kids or anything like that. I'm tending to doubt it, but I think that, again, this is a place where there's opportunity. I discovered John Swain. There's a gravestone for him on Lake Quantapowhat in Wakefield, so that may have been portion, but I'm still trying to figure out where John Swain's actual living space was. So that would be interesting to try to trace down Phoebe or Phyllis and find out more about that. So Daniel Mansfield laid out a will May 15th, 1753, and he wills his property to his daughters. He had, I think it was 5 and then 4 or 6 and then 5 daughters. Apparently one of them died, or he wrote them out of the will anyway by the time the will was executed. And he writes in there his Negro boy named Caesar. He's leaving to his son, Thomas. Remember that part about 2 slaves? This is where those 2 slaves come from, is from the will. And how much access Alonzo Lewis had to this information, I don't think he used it. I have a feeling it was kind of an oral tradition. But in later versions of the history, they certainly explored these other existing documents.
Excuse me.
Yeah?
Could the fact that he was called king refer back to the Caesar? Caesar means king, doesn't it?
Well, this is a different person.
Oh,
Again,
excuse me.
these were things that were, they named them for like Roman-related things, a lot of the enslaved people. So this is Caesar, and it's a Negro boy named Caesar. And also in the same will, I accept and reserve my Negro manservant named Pompy, and then it says only. So from that, I see that Pompy is essentially, upon Daniel's death, is a free person. He doesn't commit Pompy to another member of the family. That Pompy becomes free upon Daniel Mansfield's death. Then in 1757, on August 5th, Caesar, manservant of Daniel Mansfield, Esquire, is buried. So Caesar dies in 1757, just a matter of months before Daniel Mansfield dies. And about that time, Daniel Mansfield also purchased the east end of what's now the Ironworks house at Saugus. So that has been known as the Appleton Taylor Mansfield house. And the west portion was owned by one person, and Daniel Mansfield obtained the east portion. Do I think that Pompey lived there? No. But I do think there's a good possibility that he may have gone through it. Then Daniel Mansfield dies a few months later, and it's an accidental death. January 6, 1758, Daniel Mansfield, Esquire, fell off his horse and received wound of which he died January 9th, so 3 days, about 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was an accidental death. And at that point is when I believe that Pompey would have been freed. So that would have been in the early part of 1758. How they legally did that, I don't know. And it could be that Thomas Mansfield maybe assisted in the execution of what was going on with the will. And this gravestone, actually, if you look to the left of the gravestone in the back, Alonzo Lewis is buried in the same cemetery. This is the West Cemetery in Lynn. So this is some of the items in the inventory. And I think the inventory is a really great opportunity to learn more about Pompey, because Pompey was living in this situation, and I would guess was relatively close in the family to Daniel Mansfield. So let's see, 2 tons of salt hay and other fodder, 1 ton of English hay, pair of oxen, pair of working steer, another pair of working steer, 2 years old, 3-year-old cow, and 10 cows. But here's the interesting thing: an old sorrel white-faced mare, an old chestnut or mouse-colored mare, which is the same terminology they used in the Ironworks inventory in the 1650s, mouse-colored horse, and a young mare, 4 pounds and 3 shoats. Those are like young pigs. And in the kitchen, in the inventory, is a Negro man named Pompey. Then in the great garret, You can see these things, 10 bushels of barley. All in all, things that would have been stored, as far as I can determine, in like linen bags. There's about 3 cubic yards of material that would have been stored in bags. There's barrels and bushels and all things that are good in the garret, in the attic, to keep away from animals as best as possible, even though rats and mice still would have accessed those bags in order to get at corn, grain, and other grains. But the interesting thing in this inventory is the bed and bedding for servant. That's Pompy. Caesar has died, so there's only one servant left, and that's Pompy. So this inventory, this garret, is Pompy's living space. This is where he was living. So it was be great time to, the fairgrounds hired an illustrator to work with me in order to create a vision of what Pompy's living space looks like. And so this is it. This is what she came up with. So all those things are incorporated into this attic vision. Tried to give it maybe a 1750s look with light colored wood that hadn't been aged around for a few hundred years. That was relatively new construction. Actually, we used the Rebecca Nurse homestead in Danvers as the model for this space, about the same period in time.
Probably felt like a palace to him.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. It really, in laying these things out, like the barrel, there's one barrel, I think, of beef or something. Everything else was listed as casks, which were probably smaller things and easier to get up tight spaces in order to get into an attic. So that's why we used these various smaller size barrels and so forth. Corn chest, candles, all of those things are depicted in this illustration. And a lot of this information that you see about Pompy, Daniel Mansfield in the vital records that are printed come from this commonplace book of Richard Pratt. And actually, Richard Pratt's father, Grover Pratt, was an inhabitant of one of Daniel Mansfield's houses. So I'm not sure exactly what the relationship may have been there, but he had knowledge of the Mansfield family. So it says at the time of his death, he owned the water privileges on Water Hill and also that on Saugus River at the Cinder Banks.
Is Water Hill where Old Neighborhood is now? Is that Water Hill?
I don't know. I was hoping somebody, again, this crowdsourcing thing.
That's the street that they're on, Water Hill?
Is it?
Yeah.
So, and according to the inventory, Daniel Mansfield owned property all over the place. He owned orchards, and there's one thing I saw that may have operated some of his business in Lynn by Boston Street. So again, all places it would be great to look into more details on. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, but if anybody wants to pick it up, please do that. So based on that, by the Cinderbanks concept, I brought the illustrator around, and we went down in back of where the Henkel place is, down near the blacksmith shop at the ironworks. And there had been a dam in there, and there's still ruins of the dam there where the fish ladder goes up. And in the 1940s, I think it was, you can see where some of that area was flooded. It's in some of the federal maps. There's a little pond down there. But based on that general idea being near the cinder banks, we went down there, looked at some of the stone structure, and came up with this concept picture of what the fulling mill that Daniel Mansfield may have owned and where it may have operated. Look at these things that are listed on here: fulling mill, dam, and streams. Again, this is at the cinder banks. Wash house and furnace. These are things that are related to the cloth processing that Daniel Mansfield did. He was a clothier. And in 18th century terms, it doesn't necessarily mean a person who makes clothes, but a person who processes cloth. And these are all tools related to the processing of cloth. A coal house, that one I find interesting because when they were looking for the ironworks, the source of the water for the ironworks, they had gone up the river, crossed Central Street, and the house on the corner there, they came across a lot of charcoal, and they discovered the charcoal house for the ironworks. Is it possible that that same charcoal house that was functioning for the ironworks was also utilized by Daniel Mansfield in order to store charcoal for his cloth processing operation? Archer vault with covering. This seems to be something that was likely an outdoor workspace of some sort. Clothier's shop, don't know exactly what that is. Dye house and copper, those would have been a place for finishing wool. It appears that he didn't have anything to do with actually weaving wool, that might have come from someplace else, and that he was processing it in order to dye it or full it to make it functional for a particular purpose of a customer. Hot press screw plates, iron bars, and etc. That might have been for printing or just even pressing the cloth. Could have been for multiple purposes. Cold press screw and other utensils. 4 pair of clothes shears, and that would have been used in perhaps for trimming some of the fulled cloth. A lead dye vat, and this is the one that I think is really important. Tenter bars and etc. You've heard of tenter hooks. And that's in this illustration, you can see that long strip right there. And this is where I chose to sort of depict Pompy, was using the tenter bars. So these bars would be set up outside, and you would, once your cloth was processed, you would hang it on these and stretch it out to have it come out nice and straight and uniform across. So that's my depiction of Pompy there, was setting up the cloth on the tenter bars. Now, the reason decided to put Pompy in that situation was when Daniel died, he left a lot of his tools to his son, who was a clothier as well, or a clother. A clother, again, means a person who is processing cloth. When Pompy signs a document later on for his land, I can't remember if he's giving the land up or the purchasing the land, but I think it's purchasing the land. He is listed as a clothier, as his occupation. And what else about him? It'll come to me. Pompey's mark shows up on one of these documents as well, and the property was later sold off. But this depicts kind of the area in Saugus with orchards and other buildings that were set up around the area. This is an 18th century picture of a fulling mill, and I think it's really interesting that it doesn't have any covering over it. There's a water wheel there, and the way a fulling mill works. Anybody watch the Outlander series?
Some of them.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw a version where the women are sitting around a table and they're taking a piece of cloth and they're beating on the cloth and spinning it around and beating it some more. That is the function of a fulling mill. In medieval times, some of the people that were not, let's say, of the upper crust would be, as fullers, they would collect urine. The urine would become stale. They'd put it into like tubs, put the cloth in the tubs, and they'd walk it like you might be squeezing grapes or something in order to process. What they're trying to do is take the wool cloth, fluff up the fibers so that it covers the weave itself, and seals it up against the weather. So it's a lot tighter in the weave. And then in the 1940s, I think that scene from Outlander comes from a 1940s film that was done in Scotland, trying to preserve their heritage of these women doing these work songs, processing the cloth around in a circle. And they would have probably been dealing with urine-soaked cloth as they're passing this stuff around on the table singing. But it was mechanized, that process, in a fulling mill. And what you have are these two big or multiple large hammers, wooden hammers, that would pound back and forth the wool that was in the bin underneath it. So I know my pointer doesn't work on the TV, I don't think. It kind of goes away. Oops. So then once it was done with the processing and they rinsed it all off, then they lay it out on those tinter bars in order to dry so it would be nice and straight and uniform and headed for the tailor. And another part of that was brushing this nap on the wool. Once it was done, again, to make it nice and smooth, and they may have used the shears in order to trim off the excess fuzz on there in order to make it a smooth, nice looking piece of fabric. And this is an early 19th century view of some of that operation that might take place inside. One of the things you'll see, and there's lots of them in there, on the floor and in their hands, it's called a cross. I forget what the other word is, but it has teasel in it. You've seen teasel plants. There's like a brush material, and they would brush this fabric again to make it look nice. I find it interesting that occasionally teasel will show up by the ironworks down by the waterfront. And I'm not sure if that's because they used to plant it there. When I first started there, they used to have wildflower seeds, and the whole hillsides were full of wildflowers. Or if it might be something that's descended from teasel that might have been used there in the past. And we put teasel in that illustration, in the backside illustration, growing against the water. But kind of related to that, even is the ironworks. Joseph Jenks had a blacksmith shop there down by the blast furnace. I think it's 1651. A wire drawing person had died in Boston, and he was trying to obtain ownership of that equipment. It was being offered. Apparently, it was denied. But Joseph Jenks did process wire at the site. Whether he finally got that wire drawing equipment or not, I don't know, but there's multiple evidence that he actually did it. There was over 900 pins found in the shop when they did the archaeology, brass pins. I found also in I think it was the 1650s, George Corwin, who was a merchant in Salem, kind of associated with what's now called the Witch House. George Corwin was selling hooks, fish hooks, codfish hooks that he was buying from Joseph Jenks. And also some of the wire that Jenks wanted to make was for making wool cards, those wire cards that you use for carding wool. And in the archaeology, this isn't a Joseph Jenks thing, but it's later, it's the same technology. The wool mills that were in back where Henkel was, in the storage place, they may have been processed, they had wool carding machines or something there, and they discarded all these partial coils of what they call clothing in the wool carding, wool processing business. These coils of it that were found there, there's probably 6 to 10 coils of this discarded material would have gone around the drums for processing wool. So related to the teasel, same kind of function. Then, months later, just a few months later, Thomas Mansfield dies. September 11th, 1758, in an interesting coincidence, Thomas Mansfield fell off his horse between Marblehead and Salem and died immediately. I'm wondering if Thomas Mansfield inherited one of those horses from Daniel Mansfield.
Good thought.
Again, this is just a little thing of what a clothier is, a cloth worker. Now, this is a detail from Alonzo Lewis's 17 1829 map illustrating where Pompey's house may have been. Because after Pompey was freed, he obtained a piece of property with the help from a man named Isaac Howard, maybe Howard from Salem. And it appears that Isaac Howard was a black entrepreneur who may have loaned money to people to help them get started, perhaps as a result of former slaves. So this map sort of depicts the ironworks in it. At the intersection where the river and the road come together, there's that long building. I have a feeling that that is the cinder banks, the slag pile from the ironworks sticking out there. It shows Pompey across the river from Round Hill. It shows the meeting house that used to be in the center, I guess, where the Civil War monument is now. But I'm not sure about the scale and how accurate all of this is. I mean, he may have just said, well, back in that area is where Pompey was, and back over this area is where the ironworks was. I know they knew where the ironworks was. But I just have a question of scale and accuracy and detail. How detailed was Alonzo Lewis's map? Conceptually, it was fine, but detail, I don't know. So I'm hoping whoever this person, what's the name, Baumgartner, who's searching for Pompey's property and Pompey's house, I'm hope they're using the wealth of documentation that is out there. So Pompey acquired the land in 1762, and I'll say, use the words, he gave it up in 1788. And I'm not sure exactly what the situation was, other than Isaac Howard died, and I believe it was his family that was that was recovering the land. What happened to Pompey from that point, I have no idea. Was Pompey even still alive? I'm guessing he was, but I don't know. There was a lot going on in Massachusetts at that time. Again, places where you can go to learn a lot more about how formerly enslaved people gained their space after the American Revolution. So you've got the American Revolution. Pompey is freed long before that. But during the Revolution, Massachusetts comes up with its own constitution, and any support that might have been there for slavery is gone. So through lawsuits and that sort of thing in the early 1780s, any enslaved people were free. And how they got into main portions of society is going to depend, one-to-one on what the person's situation was. But we don't know what that was for Pompey. An interesting thing also comes out in 1788. There's this warning out where Massachusetts says that I want to be careful how I said this. I'm not sure if it's black people or enslaved people, but anybody who's not from the town is being warned that they have to leave the town. Or leave Massachusetts. I think what they're trying to do is, Rhode Island, for instance, still has slavery until the early part of the 19th century. But people from Rhode Island, including former American Revolution soldiers from Rhode Island, like from the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, were looking for other places to go after the war. But various towns did not want to have to support these people, so they were being warned to go out. I don't know if they ever actually did anything about the warning out, but these papers came out, and each town was supposed to basically inventory the black people that were in the town. Just another interesting place to explore. And then the African Society, I think it's in the late 18th century, early 19th century, is formed in Boston. And I just think it's amazing to look at the rules of that, where the former enslaved people are joining this African society to become real citizens. And they took this very seriously about the rules and so forth of the African society. They were proud to be new American citizens. So where does Pompey fall into this place? I don't know, but I think it's places to look into. And just going forward, I'm hoping people will pick this story up. These books, I've gone around to Lynn Public Schools, Saugus, anything that I could find that I thought was associated or who might be interested in this. Reading, North Reading, the North Reading Library, Saugus Public Schools, Historical Society, the Ironworks. I'm just hoping that other people will pick this up. Now, the book itself, I didn't really write much in this. I transcribed a good portion of the documents that are in this. I'm hoping that, we were talking about skills that people can use when we started, and talking about losing the idea of cursive writing is the word. So we set this book up so that you see the original document here, here, and the transcription over here. So maybe we can teach cursive writing through this, and just an appreciation for what kind of resources are out there. And we added the illustrations on there on the front and the back to get an idea of what Pompey's life might have been, and then put a glossary in the back so that you can understand some of those words that might be a little elusive that are in the inventory. And hopefully it's just a little workbook that people can look into to try to understand the Pompey story and about searching for your history in itself. So I thank you all for coming. Anybody have any questions? Yeah?
I have a question. I teach at Saugus High School.
Yeah.
I've been teaching. I've always said Pompey. So I don't know if there's if you have just a preference or if there's any evidence to go Pompey or Pompey.
Me, I would rather say Pompeii, but I think I'm in the minority. Yeah, but because it's spelled Pompe in the document, and in his purchase of the land, it seems Pompey rather than Pompeii, but I think it should be Pompeii myself.
So I guess I'll continue with that.
Yeah,
But then
that's
how can I procure a copy of your book? Because I'd love to be
well,
able to. I'm starting my unit on African American history
good.
next week,
Yep.
2 weeks from now.
Yep.
And I start with him.
So we can maybe talk about that afterwards, after we're shut off. Because the fairgrounds itself, not really sure how they're going to distribute the books yet.
You got 2 of them, right? 3 of them, right?
Yep.
So maybe one could start with. There's copy machines in this book.
Have you ever run across someone who spoke a few years ago here, Doreen Wade,
Yep.
who was going through the Registry of Deeds to find the precise location?
Yep.
Do you
I
know what?
talked with her, and actually I gave her, I think it's about 2021 is when I did a lot of that transcription stuff.
Oh,
And I had done some of it, and I did some more for her, and I gave her the stuff that I did.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, because it's.
I didn't know if she might have been here tonight. I was kind of hoping.
Yeah, I've sort of lost track with her recently
Yep.
because she did move. She was living in Salem for a while, and then she moved to a different town.
Oh, okay.
I've forgotten exactly which one now. So, and then I'm not sure, because it was a while ago that I read some other historical book that said that his house was a stone house that was standing until at least 1910.
Yeah, I read
remember
that
like
too.
walking up and down the hills between the top of Vinegar Hill and, looking for any sign of stone foundations or anything. I didn't see anything that looked like it might be part of the
To me, I
house.
think one of the major clues, and I don't know enough to do this, even though it's something I would like to have done in retirement, was to try to put together the 1638 map of what Lynn looked like.
Yeah.
Because there are some pieces that are all listed as to how many acres each person had, but using
Right.
that as a base to figure out where various things are. But in one of the later deeds related to Pompey's property is listed a pond.
Oh.
And so I think the pond would be something, if you can figure out where that pond was,
Yeah.
you might be able to narrow in where Pompey's house was.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know enough or have those mapping skills in modern terms to do it, which is, I think, is the best way to do it. but I think it's doable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tracing it, Mansfield owns so much property.
Yeah,
And part of it was between Vinegar Hill and the river maybe, but lots of it was elsewhere.
and
Then the question is to figure out which part it might have been.
and then
Yeah.
one of the, so 1788, when Pompey, we'll say, like I said, gave up the land, it went to Howard, and then Howard went to another Mansfield
Oh, okay,
after that, but I kind of lost track of where all that went to.
yeah. It's an amazing story, there's.
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
Just a little bit of tantalizing information and then a lot of work to try to figure out what does this mean?
Yeah.
Where was
So I'm
it?
hoping
What
other
was it?
people will
Yeah.
take that up.
Yeah.
And, from this, like the inventory, like I say, I just think the inventory is fantastic. If you want to learn
Yeah.
more about what Pompey's life was and who he was, you can look at all these things that he was exposed to in the Mansfield family.
Right.
And again, after Thomas was dead and Daniel was dead,
Yeah.
he was a clothier.
Yeah.
And where did he get the tools to carry on his trade?
Mhm.
How did he work in? What was his customer base? And did he have skills, pre-existing skills, when he came to North America? All right. Thank you for coming.